polka dot
thing
going on.
Do you want to start?
Sure. So, the premise of this Kamandi story is pretty much based on a specific issue of the Kirby run, number 29, I believe.
Yeah.
But you also kind of infuse some different elements around, like click-clack, the rap people. Curious how you went about adapting the story for a anime showcase short.
Oh, that's a great question. We took, because we are going off the assumption, first of all, the character's so cool and his world is so cool. I think it's really neat. But most audiences are not going to be familiar with him. A lot of comic people, comic fans don't know a lot about him. I had to do a lot of research on him. I produced a ton of characters. And so one of the things that was really neat was we had just a short to introduce him, his world, his characters, and what it's always a question of what you show and what you don't. So in order for the story we adapted called The Mighty One, in order for that to work, we needed to at least infuse a few things from his previous story. So we needed to know who he was, his backstory, who some of his friends are. Do we put Dr. Penis in there? Do we not? There were some elements of 1 and 2, which is the imagery from 1, the setup of how he became Kamandi, how he was locked away in the bunker for that amount of time. And then the second part, there was a setup of Tufton and him being captured by rats. And we thought, that's kind of a cool little, that could be like our little teaser setup for it. And then taking the really cool story of the Mighty One, what was neat about the story was that it didn't have the original telling of Earth AD. I don't think many readers were aware that it was connected to the rest of the DC universe. And it wasn't until really this episode and the reveal of who the Mighty One was that you realize that, this is the future of the DC universe, or a possible future of it. So we thought that was a really neat story, and to help people are just watching this going, why am I watching a story about a boy living in a future with animals, with animals, and it's, why is this a DC thing? And that element of tying in the story, the payoff of it, sorry, spoilers, was really neat, and I really liked it. It was also a way to sort of, what kind of story are we telling? It's a little bit of Indiana Jones, it's a little bit of it's got kind of a morality of what a hero really is. And what I like about Kamandi is that he's just a regular person in extraordinary circumstances. He's the kind of hero we could all be. And so while everybody is trying to emulate the strength of the character or, of the Mighty One, his vulnerability, his flight, he's showing the real true traits that we all can show, wisdom, ingenuity, love for your enemies especially, which I think we really need right now.
To his point, to take a character that's sort of obscure like Kamandi, how difficult? What's the biggest challenge for you to have to condense introducing this character in a short?
When we decided to do this Kamandi short, the executive producer said, I'm going to send you some Kamandi materials. And I'm like, okay, a couple of omnibuses, this will be great. And it was just, I thought I would build it's so dense, it's such a crazily imaginative world that I was imagining something more contained, like Planet Apes with more animals. But it actually, the sheer, I still was completely unprepared for the imagination of Jack Kirby. So we had to sort of figure out how to tell the story to somebody who doesn't know anything about the character. And that, for me, was that's the funnest thing to do as a writer, because you get to you have to. It's like anytime you tell a story about anybody, even an autobiography, you have to find a few moments in the character's life and make them feel like they've seen the whole life. So what are the types of things? Well, that image at the beginning of the fallen, even though it's from Planet Apes, the fallen Statue of Liberty, the perfect symbol of fallen humanity, the scene of him on the canoeing, the cover of that magazine. We gotta have that moment. It's just one of the few images that everybody has of Planet if you know anything about him. And then we were kind of back and forth. Which ones should we use? I wanted to put Dr. Canis in, and then we went back and forth. What about Ben Boxer? He's a really unusual character, and it seemed neat because you could tell a little bit more about the world. It's just, we wanted to show that even though it's got a Planet Apes feel, it's not. And there's an interesting thing about this I found out, which is that DC at that time wanted to do rights to do Planet of the Apes. They didn't get it. So they said, well, Jack Kirby can come up with your version of the story. And so it seems as though it came afterwards. But what he tapped is a story he actually wrote before not only the Planet of the Apes movie, but Pierre Boulle's original novel in 1963, I think it was written. In 1958, he wrote a story he was writing for an imprint called, I think it's Alarming Tales. It's funny. It's like Amazing Tales. Astounding. It's simply alarming. The tales are just more alarming a little bit. But they, in that, he told a story about a guy who could travel to the future. He ends up in a future where animals have taken over, and it's dogs and tigers and rats, and it's that same kind of story. So he literally took that idea, and that's the future. And he had apparently never seen or read Planet of the Apes. He just kind of knew about it in a real general way. So without seeing it, he came up with his own world. So in a way, he sort of came up with the idea before. Planet of the Apes was written and filmed, and then he came up with his version, sort of leapfrogging over it. So it's really cool. And then of course, if you listen to the music, the soundtrack to it, there's a little bit of that kind of in there. I don't know what those instruments are. The instrument that goes, but it was really cool. So I want to see so much more of this character. I'm killed to make the series of this, but just that tie-in of one more thing I'll say. Am I talking too much?
Oh no!
Okay.
Keep going.
One more thing I'll say. In the comic, it was evident right away who the Mighty One was. He wanted you to know, page 1, Superman. Superman was the Mighty One. They just see him. They don't know who he was, but we as the reader, oh, it's Superman, right? It's a statue. They talk about him, and everything about him, they're constantly referring back to him in the way the future refers to an unknown past. But we really felt like two things. One, the thing we wanted to do was make it a story about discovering it and trying to hide it from the audience as much as possible. And so while there was a statue of nature, it didn't look anything like him. And there's like this tableau type comic book telling where they tell the past history of like how the Earth was. I mean, it's really cool. Like he lives in a fallen world. It's not nuclear war. It was just a big natural disaster that destroyed the world, and it was only Superman's effort that kept the whole world from completely being destroyed, and then he fell in battle. So they tell that as a religion or a mythology, and so we want to make sure that let's keep maybe the audience will see this cave boy kid think we're doing our version of Planet of the Apes with the serial numbers filed off, and then we'll just go ahead and reveal this at the end. And it was cool because I got to see it with my wife and son who watched it with me afterwards, and I'm like, okay, God, please just help me get to the end. And they don't know who it is. And literally, he opens the box, and there's Superman's suit there, and I went, oh my gosh, it's him. So it was really kind of cool. When you do something and it plays, it was really neat. So I talked to Jim Krieg afterwards. I said, oh, thank you for keeping it vague. He goes, I policed it all the way through. I made sure there was a sequence that we took out. There were different tests. There was one test they didn't have time for, and it was this rolling ball that was going back and forth. Imagine it's sort of like going in and out of these channels, and they had to make it through, and more of them are dying. And when they finally make it through, they manage to crash the ball, and Kamandi reads something on the side of the ball that we don't see, and he goes, and he knows, and we don't know yet. And then he fights Quicklock, and then at the end, you see the ball is at the top of the alien planet. And I thought that was they still show that. You look at the payoff. You see it at the end. But still, I was like, oh, thank God it's there. But it was like, it would have been really cool because the actual Indiana Jones ball was the alien planet ball. So
that's really cool.
So please clamor for a series and for me to be involved.
I'm recording. No, I got a phone call 2 days ago and said, you need to be at this panel. I can't be here. And I'm like, all right, here I go.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
I would have like, oh, I didn't have the button recorded. Can you do that again? I'd be like, anything else?
Yeah, I know. It's definitely like
I'm so in love with your shirt.
I'm
jealous of it.
Everybody's
Is it literally the polka dot man, or did you just luck out? And
it's from I got it from Hot Topic, so it's like literally an official.
It's meant to be him.
Yes.
Okay, that's really cool.
That is cool.
I could have like shirt off.
One person thought it was Wonder Bread, so it's either the Wonder Bread shirt or polka dot man. I was gonna say, yeah. very great Easter eggs like that of the Daily Planet, but also I'm curious if this was your idea or something you were aware of. I think another Kirby creation, Omak, Buddy Blank.
Yes.
It's his grandfather. I think you briefly see him at the beginning.
That's fine.
That was intentional and the Omak.
That is a real. I didn't know. That was another thing that ties in, but we never mentioned Omak, and I don't think that even though some people know Omak for a superhero or character in the DC universe, a little more than he's the Clark Kent of it, right? In a way. And so he is descended from him too. So it's really interesting. I didn't realize how that all. I learned that. So that's there, but I just don't think it's as obvious. You know, there's something as obscure as that, and then there's the Superman S. It's like, okay, there's no getting out of that one. So I think if you are a fan at all or know the character at all, then you already know he's a part of this. I think if you don't, I think that won't tip anybody else. You're able to have it tie into something that's equally as obscure. Most people don't know. Although I see more.
And so Jack Kirby had a specific part of the DC universe with Kamandi, Omak, Nam, and the New God. What other parts of, is there anything else that Kirby had created that you would want to tell in a short form like this?
You know, honestly, I would love to see something focusing entirely on the New God in a really heavy way. I think it would be really cool. As far as I'm here to represent DC, but whatever he's touched has always been fantastic. So, but right now, this is a really cool place to be because it's that those characters that are superheroes because of their presence. Like Charlton Heston in Planet Apes is not a superhero.
Right.
Kamandi is because I can say Kamandi. Who likes Kamandi? Because Kamandi, I always say Kamandi because that's how it looks like it's red. But Kamandi is really how he should be. Yes, that's how he got his name.
Oh,
really
got
cool.
you.
I say potato wrong a lot. So,
Stone potato.
Yeah, so
It's a potato.
I never correct. So I figure, like, you know what? Unless somehow Jack Kirby himself can tell me, then I'm never going to correct anybody on it.
But you know what's funny is everybody's seen Dune, the new movie.
Yeah.
I was really stuck on Harkonnen. Harkonnen. I'm like, Harkonnen. The Harkonnens are coming. Who?
The who?
Harkonnen. So it's one of those things. I think you get something stuck in your head. You forgot about it. But I think this world is so crazy. I don't think you could ever do all of it. It's just so crazy. He falls in love with the woman flower. We kind of introduce Click-Clack in a different way, but I am really in love with people who have an unusual creature that as their black, that really interesting animal that fantasy animal that they travel the world with, and I think there was just a lot that you could tell and adapt the stories and make them a little bit more, bring them down to earth a little bit, so you can tell you can never go quite as crazy as Kirby does, but there's so much there. I was really surprised. I'm like, does this guy work? He's like, there's that one guy. I'm like, he's in this like amazing experiment. He's part of this group. There's a thing where there's technically two other guys, and they can only stay together. Really, they can't be apart for that long, and they have this heart button that they push and protects them from radiation. There's a lot of different aspects of still having this last boy on Earth, and apparently he's only been mentioned or put on film or media at all. He was on Batman Brave and the Bold, a couple of episodes, which I wrote for that show, but I didn't write those episodes. But that was my most familiarity with the character, apart from just reading a comic or two when I was younger. And then he gets a brief mention, apparently, in Grant Gustin's The Flash. I think Eobard Thawne says something like, I've traveled the whole timeline from Anthro, the first boy, to Kamandi, the last. It was kind of a quick way to sort of mention them. But that's it. But you think that almost any, between Bruce Timm and James Tucker and Jim Krieg and all these people and Greg Weisman all have done these DC universes where they bring the most obscure characters. Like I've written for like
now James Gunn kind of
right. right? Like, he didn't meet him, like, oh my gosh, that's the best character in the movie. And he looked up and he's like, okay.
Just going to roasting.
Okay, well, start the music. You gotta
So usually I run
Musical
around
chairs?
and go, duck, duck, duck.
Should I go over here? What should I do?
Yeah, you're coming this way, and I'll...
Okay. Well, thank you. That was interesting. I just hope it recorded.